Hello everyone, I'm Spencer and I'm a teacher for Headwaters Science Institute. The type of teaching that I get to do is a little different in that I get to help students like you design and conduct their own scientific research projects. This is really neat because science isn't just one thing, it's a whole set of skills and techniques that you can use to answer just about any question that you have. We're going to teach you how to do this over the course of the next 3 lessons that we're going to show you here.
The goal of today's lesson is for you to come up with your very own research question. To do this, you will use the question asking worksheet included in the description of this video. Today's lesson should take you about 50 minutes to complete. During subsequent lessons, we will help you design experiments to test that question and look at the results of the data you collected. In between lesson 2 and 3, you will need to collect your data by yourself. To help us understand where things are going, let's take a look at a diagram of the scientific process. The scientific process is a way of exploring the world around us. This often starts with a question, from which we make a hypothesis or prediction. From there, we plan out our investigation or experiment to help us test our hypothesis and answer our question. Once we've done our experiment, we interpret our findings or look at the data we collected. This may give us new questions to try and answer, and we can also share the findings that we came up with and what discoveries we made with the rest of the world. During today, we are going to focus just on how to make a great scientific question. During lesson 2, you'll plan your investigation. You can create a research project around just about anything. Headwaters will bring you ideas of things you could create a research project around, or you can choose your own topic. This could be anything from what affects how many organisms are living in different places around your backyard, or tracking down some of the sources of pollution in local waterways or ecosystems near where you live. In order to guide our question asking, it's important to consider the parts or components of the system we are studying. This includes all of the living and non-living parts. Your job is to write out a list of the components of the system you are studying. If I was studying the forest in my backyard, the components would be the trees, soils, insect, and other living animals there. During these lessons, we'll give you a task like this and ask you to pause this video while you work. You can restart the video once you have completed this task of writing down what components are in the system you are studying. The second thing to do before we start coming up with scientific questions is write down what are the things that could affect the components you just listed. It's okay if you have some overlap between your two lists here. Things that might affect the components in the forest I'm studying could be the sun, water, parasites or invasive species, humans, and the other living organisms that interact with each other in the forest. You can pause your video while you work here and restart once you're done. Now that we have listed the parts of the system we are studying, we are going to begin brainstorming research questions. This can sound a little hard at the start, but we're just going to start small. Your first task is to write down any 4 questions you can think about around the system you are studying. Your next challenge is to come up with 4 more questions that include one of the components or things that affect the components which you listed before. The next challenge that you have for coming up with questions is around question starters. You can see the list of question starters here. Your job is to come up with 5 questions that uses each of the question starters on your worksheet. The next type of questions that we're going to ask you to come up with are ones that combine multiple components in the system we're talking about. You can use the template, how does blank affect blank, and fill in different components from your system. Come up with 4 questions that use this format or combine multiple components in your system. The last question asking challenge we have for you today is to come up with 4 questions that are specific to the location you have access to study. Think about where you might be able to do your research project and ask questions about that place. Nice job! You have come up with a bunch of great scientific questions. Now, our job is to choose one of these questions to create a research project around. Look over the list of questions that you've come up with and choose one to create an experiment about. When choosing your question, it's important to keep these 3 things in mind. The first thing to keep in mind is making sure that your research question is measurable. This means that you could make measurements that would help you answer your question with the scientific equipment you have, in the time that you have, in the place that you have. Think about what types of measurements you would need to take to answer your question and make sure those are something you could do. The second thing to keep in mind when choosing a research question is to make sure that that question is specific. It could be really hard to measure how many trees there are in the world, but you might be able to create a research project around the number of trees in your backyard. Be specific to what you could accomplish in the time frame that you have. The last thing to keep in mind when choosing a research question is make sure that you choose a question that is interesting to you. The fun part about all of this is you get to come up with your own question and choose something you are excited about. So make sure that you pick a question that is not only measurable and specific, but also interesting. Go through your list of questions, keeping these 3 things in mind, and choose the one that best fits these 3 criteria. You can pause the video while you work and restart once you've chosen your research question.
Nice work, everyone. Today you came up with a great research question. During our next lesson, we're going to teach you how to design an experiment that you can use to test that question. All right, see you next time.